It was supposed to be a joyful moment. At a small animal shelter on the outskirts of town, volunteers cheered as Bella, a rescued German Shepherd, finally gave birth after weeks of care. But their smiles faded when the vet leaned in for a closer look. And froze. These weren't ordinary puppies. Their size, their strange fur texture, even the faint noises they made, everything was off. Within minutes, the shelter was in chaos. What had Bella just given birth to? And why did the vet suddenly demand that everyone leave the room? What they discovered next would leave the entire town speechless and change everything they thought they knew about Bella's past. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The rain fell in relentless sheets that night, drumming against the tin roof of the small-town animal shelter. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only a few volunteers cleaning up after a long day. Suddenly, through the pounding rain, a faint scratching echoed from the gate outside. At first, no one noticed. But when the sound came again, weak, desperate, one of the volunteers grabbed a flashlight and hurried out into the storm. Through the misty darkness, the beam of light caught a trembling shape near the gate. A German Shepherd, soaked to the bone, stood hunched and shivering, her golden fur clinging tightly to her frail body. Her eyes, deep, sorrowful pools of brown, looked up pleadingly as if begging for help. One paw lifted weakly, pressing against the fence before she collapsed into the mud. The volunteer gasped and called out for help. Within seconds, the small team rushed outside, umbrellas forgotten, hearts pounding. They lifted the dog gently, feeling her ribs beneath the wet fur. That's when they noticed her belly, swollen, heavy, and moving slightly. She was pregnant. "Get her inside, quick!" shouted one of them. They laid her on a soft blanket under a heater, the room quickly filling with the scent of wet fur and antiseptic. The old shelter walls creaked as thunder rolled overhead. The head caretaker, Linda, knelt beside the trembling dog and whispered softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." When they checked her collar, their confusion deepened. The leather strap was cracked and burned, but there was no name tag, only a small metallic piece with strange engraved numbers. It wasn't a normal ID. Linda frowned. "Where did you come from, girl?" she murmured. They decided to name her Bella. The name somehow fit and gentle yet strong. As she lay there, her breathing steadied, though her eyes remained haunted. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the dimly lit shelter, something new began. A fragile hope for a dog whose story was only just beginning. The next few days at the shelter were quiet, yet something about Bella unsettled everyone. She wasn't aggressive, but she carried a tension in her body that never seemed to fade. Every sudden noise, a door closing, a dish clattering, even the distant barking of other dogs, made her flinch. When volunteers tried to comfort her, she allowed gentle touches but kept her eyes fixed on the corners of the room, as if expecting something or someone to appear. Linda spent hours by her side, speaking softly, offering bits of food and reassurance. "You're safe here, girl," she would whisper, brushing a strand of fur from Bella's face. But Bella's gaze often drifted toward the shelter windows. She seemed to be listening for sounds no one else could hear. One volunteer joked that she acted like a soldier returning from war, and in a way that wasn't far from the truth. Dr. Harris, the shelter's veterinarian, began her medical checkups. The first thing he noticed was her body's condition. Though underweight, she had strong muscles, the kind that came from training, not wandering. Her belly was heavy with life, and he could feel faint movements beneath his hand. "She's close," he murmured. "But there's something odd. Her heartbeat seems irregular." When he tried to use his stethoscope near her abdomen, Bella tensed, growling softly. Not out of aggression, but fear. Dr. Harris backed off immediately. "It's okay, girl," he said gently. Still, the moment his hand moved away, Bella turned in a slow circle and lay down, wrapping her body protectively around her belly. At night, the security cameras showed her restless. She paced her enclosure, occasionally whining toward the shadows. Sometimes she'd sit perfectly still, eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for someone who would never return. The shelter staff couldn't explain it, but one thing was certain. Bella wasn't just protecting her unborn puppies. She was guarding a secret, and whatever it was buried deep within her, a mystery waiting to be uncovered. The storm came without warning. Wind howled through the cracks of the old shelter, rattling the windows and sending the dogs into uneasy fits of barking. Linda was locking up for the night when she heard it, a sharp, low whimper echoing from the back room. It was Bella. The German Shepherd lay in her enclosure, panting heavily, her body trembling with pain. Water pooled beneath her as her contractions began. "Dr. Harris," Linda shouted, rushing to grab towels and a heating pad. Within minutes, the veterinarian burst through the door, drenched from the rain. He knelt beside Bella, his experienced eyes scanning her condition. "She's in labor," he confirmed, "but it's early." The shelter transformed into controlled chaos. Volunteers fetched blankets, sterilized tools, and tried to calm the other animals as thunder roared overhead. Bella's breaths came faster now. Her eyes darted wildly, filled with both fear and determination. She growled softly when Harris moved too close, but his calm voice seemed to soothe her. "Easy, girl. I'm here to help." Hours passed. One by one, the contractions intensified. Then, with a strained cry, Bella delivered her first newborn. Linda gasped. "Oh my! What is that?" Harris froze. Under the dim yellow light, the tiny creature didn't look like any newborn puppy he'd ever seen. Its fur was darker, almost charcoal gray, and its limbs were oddly stiff. When he touched it gently, the newborn let out a faint squeak, not the soft yelp of a pup, but a strange metallic-like sound, almost mechanical. Another contraction came, and then another newborn emerged, identical in color and movement. Soon there were 5, then 7, then 9. Each one looked the same, unusually large heads, odd textures, faint, irregular breathing. The air in the room grew thick with unease. Linda whispered, Are they okay?" Dr. Harris didn't answer. He leaned closer, his brow furrowing as his stethoscope failed to register normal heartbeats. The rhythm was erratic, almost artificial. His gut tightened. Something was terribly wrong. As Bella lay exhausted, she turned her head toward her newborns, licking them gently, her maternal instincts kicking in despite the fear around her. But as Harris watched the strange litter squirm beside her, one chilling thought refused to leave his mind. These weren't ordinary puppies. The shelter was eerily silent the next morning. Even the dogs in nearby enclosures seemed uneasy, their usual barking replaced by soft whines. Dr. Harris hadn't slept a minute. He sat at his desk, staring at the medical notes from the night before. Every observation made less sense than the last. Abnormal heart rhythms, strange body temperatures, and fur that felt almost synthetic to the touch. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "What are you, little ones?" he whispered to himself. In the maternity room, Bella was restless. She hadn't eaten since giving birth, and she growled protectively whenever anyone came near her pups. Linda stood by the doorway, hesitant. "She won't even let me change her blanket," she said softly. Harris nodded. "Don't force her. She's scared. Maybe she knows something we don't." Curiosity soon overcame hesitation. Harris carefully approached Bella, his movements slow and deliberate. She lifted her head, ears pinned back, eyes sharp with warning. "Easy, girl," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt them." She didn't growl this time and only watched, trembling slightly as he knelt beside her. He gently lifted one of the newborns with gloved hands. It was heavier than it looked. The skin beneath the fur was firm, unnaturally so. He examined its small paw and froze. Under the light he could see it, a faint metallic line running just beneath the surface. "What on earth?" he muttered. Linda leaned closer. "Is that a scar?" "No," Harris whispered, his voice tight. "It's too precise for a scar." He set the newborn down gently and backed away, his mind racing. Something about this litter defied every biological rule he knew. He looked toward Bella, who lay watching him, her breathing steady but her eyes pleading. She wasn't protecting monsters, she was protecting her children. But Harris knew he couldn't ignore the signs any longer. "I need to run some scans," he said quietly, staring at the trembling mother dog. Something's not right here. Outside, thunder rumbled again, as if warning that the storm in Bella's life was far from over. Dr. Harris worked in silence, the hum of medical equipment filling the dimly lit examination room. Bella's newborns rested in a warm crate nearby, wrapped in soft towels. They looked peaceful, but something about them made the air feel heavy. Each one breathed in strange rhythmic patterns, almost synchronized. Harris adjusted the scanner, his eyes narrowing as the images appeared on the monitor. At first, the screen showed only faint outlines, tiny bones developing organs, nothing unusual. But then, as he zoomed in, faint glimmers appeared beneath the surface of their skin, thin metallic threads. No, that can't be right, he murmured, adjusting the frequency. The glimmers pulsed in slow, steady intervals as if alive. Linda, standing behind him, covered her mouth. What is that? Some kind of implant? Harris leaned closer. It looks like microtechnology, he whispered. But these are newborns. How could something like this even exist inside them? He printed out the scan images, his hands trembling slightly. The metallic traces weren't random. They formed a pattern, deliberate, symmetrical, almost like circuitry. He turned to Bella, who lay watching them through the glass window, her eyes wide but calm. Her body bore scars, faint but clear. When he parted her fur gently earlier, he had found surgical stitching along her abdomen, healed long ago. The truth began to form in his mind, dark and impossible to ignore. Someone had done this to her. Someone had tampered with life itself. Harris clenched his jaw. She didn't just run away, he said quietly. She escaped. The room fell silent. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the shelter seemed to hold its breath. Linda whispered, "You think she was part of some kind of experiment?" Harris didn't answer. He only looked again at the glowing scans, at the tiny lives that shouldn't exist. "These aren't just puppies," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "There's something else entirely. Something man-made." He shut off the monitor and exhaled slowly. "We need to find out where she came from, before someone comes looking for her." By morning, the air in the shelter felt heavier than ever. The staff whispered among themselves, unsure what was happening but sensing the unease radiating from Dr. Harris. He hadn't left his office all night. Files and medical prints were scattered across his desk, X-rays, notes, and strange patterns that didn't belong in any animal anatomy he'd ever seen. His coffee sat untouched, long gone cold. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years, an old contact at the city's Department of Animal Research. When the line clicked, a tired voice answered, "Dr. Mitchell speaking." "Mitchell, it's Harris. I need information on a German Shepherd female, unregistered, possibly from a closed facility. She's showing surgical marks and anomalies in her litter." The silence on the other end stretched long enough to make Harris's heart pound. Finally, Mitchell replied, his voice low and uneasy. "You found one, didn't you?" Harris frowned. "Found what?" "A runaway," Mitchell said grimly. "You weren't supposed to." Before Harris could question further, Mitchell hung up. He sat back in disbelief. "A runaway? From where?" That afternoon, Harris drove to the local precinct and requested a record search. The officer at the desk scanned the collar number they'd found on Bella and froze. "This code's restricted," he said, his tone shifting. "It's tied to a private research contractor, not a pet registry." "What kind of contractor?" Harris pressed. The officer hesitated, lowering his voice. "A facility outside town. Shut down months ago after a leak." A cold realization settled in Harris's chest. He returned to the shelter and stood by Bella's enclosure. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. Deep, intelligent knowing. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" He whispered. He finally understood. Bella hadn't just been abandoned. She had escaped, and those strange puppies weren't a mystery of nature. They were the remnants of something humanity had tried to hide. Harris clenched his fists. "Not again," he vowed. "They're not taking you back." Outside, the wind picked up, as if carrying the echoes of the past that had just returned. 2 days later, the shelter's calm routine shattered. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside just after sunrise, their engines humming like a threat. Linda was the first to see them. "Dr. Harris," she called out, panic in her voice, "you need to come here now." Harris rushed to the front window and froze. 4 men in dark suits were already approaching, badges flashing beneath their coats. Behind them, a van marked Animal Retrieval Unit idled quietly. His stomach twisted. They had come for Bella. The door burst open before anyone could stop them. "We have authorization to seize the German Shepherd and her litter," one agent announced, holding out a document. "These animals are property of the Department of Genetic Research." Linda stepped forward, trembling. "Property? She's a living being." The man ignored her. "Stand aside, ma'am." Bella sensed the tension instantly. The moment the strangers entered, she rose to her feet, body stiff, ears pinned back. Her growl echoed through the corridor, low, deep, and trembling with fear. When one of the agents moved toward her enclosure, she lunged, teeth bared, shielding her newborns. "Easy, girl," Harris said urgently, stepping between them. "You're only making it worse." But Bella's panic was raw, primal. Her claws scraped the floor, her eyes wild with terror. The agents reached for tranquilizers, but Harris snapped, "Don't touch her." His voice cracked with anger. "She's not your experiment anymore." The room erupted into chaos, shouts, barking, the sound of metal gates rattling. Then suddenly Bella whimpered. Her growl broke into a cry so heart-wrenching that even the agents hesitated. She pressed her body against the bars, watching as two men lifted her newborns into sterile carriers. Tears burned in Linda's eyes. "Please stop. She's begging you." Harris clenched his fists, shaking. "She's not a project," he shouted, his voice breaking. "She's a mother." For a moment everything froze, the noise, the tension, the storm of fear. Bella lowered her head, a broken sound escaping her throat, as her pups were taken from her sight. And in that silence, everyone in the room finally felt it. The unbearable grief of a mother losing everything. The next morning, the shelter felt hollow, as if every sound had been drained from its walls. Bella lay motionless in her enclosure, refusing food, her eyes vacant. The space where her pups had been was empty now, only a blanket remaining, still faintly carrying their scent. Linda sat nearby, tears streaming silently down her face. "She hasn't moved since they took them," she whispered. "She just waits." Dr. Harris stood by the window, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles whitened. He couldn't forget Bella's cry, that haunting sound that had followed him through the night. But he wasn't done, not yet. He had spent hours gathering evidence, medical scans, photos, and the facility records he'd found through back channels. What he discovered chilled him to the core. The so-called Department of Genetic Research wasn't a government division at all. It was a front for a private defense contractor, a company known for testing experimental biological hybrids. Bella and her litter were part of Project Helix, a program to create detection animals enhanced with synthetic sensory implants. The project had been quietly shut down after multiple ethical violations, and several escaped subjects. When Harris released the information to the media, the story exploded. News anchors called it the cruel experiment that shocked the nation. Animal rights organizations rallied instantly. The shelter's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, activists, lawyers, all demanding answers. Dr. Harris, one journalist said during a live interview, "You're risking everything by exposing this." "Why?" He looked straight into the camera. "Because she trusted us," he said, voice steady but heavy. "And we failed her once. We won't fail her again." Within days, protests erupted outside the research facility's gates. Bella became a symbol, the face of resilience and betrayal. People sent letters, donations, even artwork of her protecting her pups. In the middle of all the chaos, Bella still waited by her gate, silent and grieving. But when Harris entered her enclosure and knelt beside her, she slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in days, her tail moved, just once faintly, as if she still believed there was hope. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat, cameras flashing as the case of Bella versus the Department of Genetic Research began. Outside, hundreds of protesters held signs that read, "Justice for Bella and animals are not experiments." The air inside was tense, thick with anticipation and quiet fury. Dr. Harris sat beside his lawyer, his heart pounding. Across the aisle, the corporation's representatives sat stiffly in their tailored suits, their expressions cold and detached. At the center of the courtroom, a single photograph of Bella with her newborns lay projected on the screen. The image that had gone viral, the image that had moved millions. The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, began reading the case summary. This court must determine whether the animal known as Bella and her offspring are property of a research entity, or living beings deserving of protection under animal welfare law. Her tone was even, but her words carried weight. Harris swallowed hard as his attorney presented the scans, the documents, the recordings of Bella's suffering. "These are not machines," the lawyer declared passionately. "These are lives, lives that were manipulated, abandoned, and nearly destroyed." The defense tried to argue science over compassion, claiming the hybrids were non-natural assets. But when the judge asked, "And yet they breathe, bleed, and feel pain, do they not?" the courtroom fell silent. Then, in a moment that no one expected, Linda stepped forward holding a small, trembling figure, one of Bella's surviving pups that had been returned for medical testing. The little creature whimpered softly, curling against her chest. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge looked down for a long moment before speaking. This court rules that Bella and her litter are not property. They are living beings entitled to protection, care, and freedom. Custody will remain with Dr. Harris in the shelter. Tears welled in Linda's eyes. Harris lowered his head, whispering, "You're free now, girl." Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, Bella's story wasn't just about loss, it was about victory. Humanity had listened and chosen compassion. Months passed and the world slowly moved on. But for Dr. Harris and the shelter team, life had changed forever. Out in the countryside, beyond the noise of the city and the chaos of reporters, Bella now lived peacefully on Harris's small farm. The morning sun spilled across rolling fields as she ran freely through the grass, her once thin frame now strong and radiant. Her pups, half dog, half miracle, played nearby, tumbling clumsily under her watchful gaze. Their coats shimmered strangely in the sunlight, a blend of natural fur and faint metallic hues, proof of what they had endured and survived. Harris stood by the porch, coffee in hand, watching them. For the first time in years, he felt something rare, peace. Linda joined him, smiling as one of the pups chased a butterfly. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "Different, but beautiful. They're perfect," Harris replied softly. "Nature found a way to forgive what we couldn't." In the distance, Bella barked once, sharp and clear, the sound echoing through the valley. She turned toward Harris, her tail wagging, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. The memory of that cold, rain-soaked night at the shelter seemed like another lifetime. The frightened, broken mother who once guarded her pups with trembling fear was gone. In her place stood a survivor, strong, proud, and free. Every so often, visitors came to see her, journalists, scientists, even children, all wanting to meet the dog who changed how the world saw life itself. But Harris never let her live as a symbol. To him, she was simply Bella, the mother who had fought the impossible. As the sun dipped low, Bella lay in the grass, her pups nestled close. The breeze whispered softly through the fields, carrying the scent of earth, freedom, and hope. Harris watched her eyes flutter closed and murmured, "You did it, girl. You gave them a future." And for the first time since that stormy night, Bella slept peacefully, surrounded by love, her secret no longer a curse, but a gift that reminded the world what compassion truly meant.